is the rundown for today's edition of Saints Now by Chat Sports. We got a Peter Schrager mock draft that he did just by himself. And then on top of that, Field Yates and Schrager did a combined mock draft where they put their two heads together and they had a beautiful draft baby. And on top of that, we're going to be discussing, could the Saints trade up into the top 10? But finally, we got live draft coverage, ladies and gentlemen. Round one will be live 30 minutes before the first pick. So go ahead and subscribe today for free Saints coverage. It's going to be live. The picks are going to come in before they show up on TV, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So here is the Peter Schrager mock draft. This is just his own mock. We're just going to go through these picks really quick. Caleb Williams at number 1. Daniels at 2, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy. So your first 4 picks, a clean sweep of quarterbacks. Then you got a run of wide receivers with Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze. Joe Alt going to number 7, Dallas Turner at number 8. And then here's how the 5 picks leading up to the New Orleans Saints shake out. Malik Nabers, Brock Bowers, Laitu Latu, and Olu Fashanu all off the board within the 5 picks before the Saints. And I really am upset that both Brock Bowers and Olu Fashanu are off the board. I'm not really feeling going edge rusher in round 1, so Laitu Latu getting picked by the Broncos does make some sense to me, and I'm not going to be too heartbroken of it. But here is who Peter Schrager had the New Orleans Saints selecting. It is offensive tackle Taliese Fuaga out of Oregon State. The 6'5", 324-pound, just mauler of an offensive lineman is one of the best run blockers in this draft class. And he does have the ability to be a little bit of offensive guard, offensive tackle flex. And I do think that he is a really aggressive, really talented, and energetic player. He did have all of his snaps played at the right tackle position, and he didn't get beat a ton whenever he was at Oregon State. And he did test really well. But worth noting, Oregon State's offense isn't super duper pass happy. So that does help him in terms of the lack of bad production. So Taliese Fuaga is a tackle, but could play anywhere on the offensive line if needed. This one might be met with shrugs in New Orleans. But I can see this as a franchise cornerstone selection by the Saints front office. The Oregon State product has a mean streak and a motor that doesn't quit. That's Peter Schrager on the draft prospect. And here's my take on Taliese Fuaga. I really like the player and I like the prospect. I think that he could bring some aggressiveness and I think he could bring some swagger to the offense and specifically the offensive line. And I think that that would be an effective and impactful selection for the New Orleans Saints. I think that this would be a good pick. And in terms of my top 3 offensive tackles, it's Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, and Taliese Fuaga. Those are the 3 players that I would love to see the Saints walk out of the first round with, but hopefully they can make it happen. But I want you to shout out your favorite draft prospect that is an offensive lineman. Is it a Joe Alt? Is it a J.C. Latham? Is it a Taliese Fuaga? Is it Troy Fontenot? I don't know. It's your turn to sound off and shout him out in the comment section. So coming up next, we're going to be doing the Field Yates and Peter Schrager mock draft. And they actually had the Saints trading up for a really interesting prospect. And before we get into that, I got to give a big-time shout-out to today's presenting sponsor, and it is PrizePicks. So if you go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and plug in that promo code CLNS, you can get an $100 deposit match whenever you put in $100. It's so much fun. You pick more, you pick less. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. Now, football season is over, but there's a lot of action going on with the NBA playoffs. The NHL playoffs are picking up. League of Legends is going on. You got NASCAR. The Masters just wrapped up. There's so much sports going on right now. And on top of that, if you're like, hey, I'm not a basketball fan. I'm not a hockey guy, but I love football. I'm a diehard football fan. You can do season-long projections that are going to keep you engaged through all 17 games for each team. And so in terms of the projections I'm going with, I'm taking Kirk Cousins less than 4,099.5 passing yards. Cannot project a Falcon to do anything good. Christian McCaffrey, I love the moral on his receiving touchdowns. And I also love the more on C.J. Stroud's passing touchdowns, especially bringing in Stephon Diggs. That offense is going to be lethal. So PrizePicks is simple. You pick more, you pick less, and you do that on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get started now. If you haven't already, go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and get a first-time deposit match of $100. prizepicks.com/CLNS. All that information is in the comments and description of this video. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, so let's dive into what Peter Schrager and Field Yates said on a recent podcast. So the two of them released a mock draft, and you may not be able to find a ton of information out there on it because they actually released it on Spotify. But I got to give some credit to John Sigler over at Saints Wire. He kind of summed all this up, and I did take the quotes directly from his write-up. So shout out to you, John Sigler. Appreciate the help. Field Yates on the New Orleans Saints trading up. I think Tennessee is a compelling trade down team. We're going to have some fun here. This is going to be tough to do because they have paid premiums recently. But I'm having the New Orleans Saints trade up here. I do think the Saints have a desperate need at offensive tackle. They say, hey, let's address that in round 2. So Peter Schrager kind of interjected and he replied, hey, let's just say it's a swap of 7 and 14, so a first-round swap. And then we'll go some future first-rounders going from the Saints to the Titans. Something like that. So basically a first-round swap, and then the Saints also on top of that send a future first-round pick. So Field Yates, he replies, yep, sounds right to me. Malik Nabers, you're off the board. He does stay home in New Orleans. They do need a wide receiver here, and their offensive investments are relatively modest. Cedric Wilson on a 2-year deal. His contract expired in Miami. On top of that, they also brought in Equanimeous St. Brown most recently in free agency. But back to Yates. I think New Orleans is a sneaky wide receiver team, and this right here would be as good as it gets on the wide receiver front. We're having some fun here. All right, so they threw out the idea. Why not indulge it? Let's talk about Malik Nabers as a New Orleans Saint. First things first, this is not a very realistic possibility. I do not think that this will happen with the Saints. I don't think that they're going to trade up for Malik Nabers. But hey, let's talk about it because it's, fun to at least discuss and have the conversation. So Malik Nabers, I'm sure a lot of y'all are very, very familiar with who he is and what he's capable of. The measurements, 6'0", 199 pounds. He's an explosive, big play machine, and he has really, really good hands. And when he's carrying the ball, the dude's dynamic. I mean, he is tough to bring down. Excuse me. That's not good radio. In terms of some cons, he isn't the best at, getting off of getting off the contact and getting downfield. I think that he needs to release a little bit better and a little bit quicker. But the production, it's still incredible. I mean, you guys can see it on your screen. The dude's a freaking animal. And the wide receiver room in New Orleans is pretty thin. Now, they are going to more than likely roll with 6 wide receivers when they get down to the 53-man roster. But the Saints are working with 90 guys right now, or they can get up to 90 guys right now. So why not fill out the depth chart and make a guy like a Stanley Morgan, make a guy like an Equanimeous St. Brown earn their roster spot, and on top of that, you get 3, really 4 extremely dynamic, extremely talented, and cheap receivers in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, and Malik Nabers. Now, rep your squad for me, Who Dat Nation. Shout out your college team in the comments section, whether it's baseball, football, basketball. I don't care. Just pick your favorite college sports team. You guys know me. I'm an Arkansas Razorback. I went to the University of Arkansas for college, and I absolutely loved it. So I want you guys to shout out yours now in the comments. All right, so back on track with the trading up for Malik Nabers situation. Gonna be honest, Saints aren't trading up for wide receiver. Offensive line, though, different story. I would be very intrigued to trade up for one specific guy. And his name is Joe Alt. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish offensive tackle is, without doubt, the best offensive tackle in this draft class. Will he pan out to be the best draft or offensive tackle? That's a different conversation. I think the team where you go and fit and scheme, all that does make some impact there. But, I mean, the guy barely gets off balance. He's a fluid mover. He's really, really good with hand stunts. And this is a player who has the capability of being a franchise left tackle. I mean, he has some Andrew Whitworth in him, if you ask me. And the cons, I mean, there's not a lot of them, but if we're going to get picky, he doesn't have he doesn't have elite power. He has good power, but it's not elite, but it's still good. And maybe at 6'8", it's a little too tall for his own good because the higher center of gravity, maybe that kind of stuff. Like, again, this is a player who, without a doubt, is an incredibly talented option. And if the New Orleans Saints are dead set on going with a player with high relative athletic score, that is a really nice size, that is an impact player at a position in need, Joe Alt just makes nothing but sense. And I would not mind trading up for a player who on your screen tested like this. There is one spot on this picture that is yellow, and it's his vertical. And here's the thing. He doesn't need to jump that high. He's 6'8". Okay. Offensive tackle doesn't need to jump that high. Whatever. So pick one to trade up for. If you had to go and get a player in the top 10, if you were the New Orleans Saints, you're like, I'm trading up for one of these guys. Is it Joe Alt, the offensive tackle? Or is it Malik Nabers, the LSU wide receiver? Now, guys, I appreciate every single one of you for rocking and rolling with us in today's video. If you want more coverage in between these videos and you want to get to know a little bit more about me personally and just, have some fun interactive content on your social media pages, give me a follow at Trace Girouard 48 on Twitter and Instagram. And also, don't forget to subscribe for more Saints coverage all throughout the offseason and all throughout the regular season. Y'all stay golden. We'll see you next time.